Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
Welcome to this Hump Day version of Kentucky's Voice. Glad to have you with us today. We're here each weekday, 11 to noon, and you'll hear this show live on the radio, 970 WGTK, and you can watch us this afternoon on channel 21 WBNA at 4 p.m. Hope you'll join us and make this part of your day. You say, well, what is Kentucky's Voice? You might be new to this. You might have just come across it. And it is a bold conservative media outlet broadcasting across Louisville on TV and radio. We're going to become a statewide conservative media outlet dedicated to delivering news and stories that reflect the values of Kentuckians: freedom, family, faith, integrity, through a conservative lens and a commitment to truth and common sense, which Mark Twain said isn't. Common sense isn't. So oftentimes we find in government, common sense is the missing ingredient. But we're informing and engaging our audience with reporting that holds local government accountable, champions educational freedom, and highlights issues that are often ignored by the mainstream media. From defending individual liberties to showcasing community strength, Kentucky's Voice stands for principled conservatism and high character, resonating with all who value truth, tradition, and faith. We'd like to tell you more about it. If you'd like to know more about it, let us know. If you'd like to partner with us, there's a couple of ways you can do that. And one of those is to support the program. And you can do that by texting KY Voice to 53555. And another way you can partner with us is to let us know what you're thinking. Text us on our Kentucky's Voice text line at 502-571-0970. We'll check those and get those out on the air. And maybe you have a comment about an issue that we cover on here that we're talking about. Maybe you have a question about something going on in local government, in the school system. We'd love to hear from you. You can partner with us in that way at 502-571-0970. But bottom line here is our mission is to champion conservative values and common sense perspectives across Kentucky, delivering honest, principled journalism that counters the bias of the mainstream media and resonates with those who value truth and faith and integrity. And that brings me to the other way that you can partner with us on this program. And that is we want to cultivate a generation of conservative journalists and public voices who are committed to those same things: truth, integrity, principled reporting that upholds traditional values, honors the influence of faith. You know, we don't avoid stories of faith here. Many people in our state are interested in what's happening in the faith community, or they want to hear news and analysis from a faith-based point of view. They do not want that left out. That's a part of our lives, and we include that here, and we want to do that. We want to do more of that. And we want your help to do it. So we're looking for folks statewide, no matter where you may be hearing this or where you live in the state, where you might be, who will work with us on this project as a volunteer correspondent and or a content creator. And if you're passionate about local politics, your community, what's happening in our country and our Commonwealth, about defending liberty, about defending our Constitution, then let us know. You can reach me, jim.waters at kyvoice.org. I'll be happy to get you more information and get you connected to the folks working on it. But this is a great opportunity for college students studying journalism. Maybe you're in communications, maybe in political science, maybe you're an aspiring media professional. You're looking to gain some experience in broadcasting. Maybe you have a passion for media. You want to help cover and spread the conservative message. You want to help us do stories and cover issues from a perspective, and also to cover stories that the corporate media won't cover or don't cover from that conservative perspective. So we need field reporters, we need video contributors, we need radio correspondents, writers, researchers, campus correspondents. Maybe you're on a college campus, you happen to be flipping through and catch this segment. We'd love to have your voice join ours as Kentucky's Voice. And we're especially committed to covering what's happening in our Commonwealth of Kentucky and right here in the city of Louisville. So let us know. jim.waters@kyvoice.org. And or you can text us on the text line, 502-571-0970. You can use that for that as well. If you say, hey, I'd like to know more, send me a text. We'll get that information to you, and you can partner with us in that way. And three different ways there. You can be a part of this, and this is only going to work if you're a part of it, if we have partners across our state. Now, joining us today in the next segment of the show is going to be Joey Comley, who is director of Kentucky Right on Crime. Right on Crime is an organization seeking conservative solutions that will reduce crime while making our communities safer. Joey, he's a friend of mine. He's written an op-ed that was in the Career Journal last week about how Kentucky's systems of fines and fees for criminal offenses disproportionately affects the poor, and that the system often resorts in handing out punishments that are not proportionate to the crime. That's what they end up becoming. And so I thought I'd read a little bit of this editorial, then we'll get Joey to join us and give us his take and kind of some more analysis on this in the next segment. Because while we have discussed conservative criminal justice reform policies on this show before, we haven't discussed this particular topic. So he writes, imagine this: a young father in rural Kentucky working 2 part-time jobs gets a traffic ticket for an expired vehicle registration. He can't pay the fine in full, so he's assessed additional court fees, late penalties, collection surcharges. He misses one hearing because his shift at the factory runs long, and a warrant is issued for his failure to appear. Before he knows it, a $75 ticket spirals into thousands of dollars in court debt that he and his family cannot escape. What happens next? He loses his job, then his license. Ultimately, he loses his freedom. Behind bars in the county jail, his stay is logged at $47 per day on the taxpayer's dime, and wipes away his debt at $50 per day, relieving him of any real obligation to repay. This isn't a rare story. It's business as usual in Kentucky's criminal fines and fees system, and it's not a conservative solution for public safety, writes Joey Comley. Kentucky's fines and fees model may sound like personal accountability on paper. In practice, however, it's a government bureaucracy that punishes poverty, creates endless red tape, and costs taxpayers more to enforce than it collects. In a new report by the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, it's estimated that our state spends more than 40 cents to collect every dollar in fines and fees, an administrative burden that should make every fiscal conservative cringe. Compare that to the IRS, which spends just 34 cents for every $100 it collects. That's not a typo. While our Commonwealth is responsibly charting the course to zero individual income tax, it cannot keep wasting money trying to extract payment from people who simply don't have it. Now, some might argue that taxes are more certain than court debt, and that's true. But while the IRS uses audits and letters, Kentucky uses incarceration. And unlike the IRS, which rarely cancels debt, the court system cancels debt for jail stays and doesn't even maintain a centralized database to track how much is owed, to whom, or how effectively it's collected. There will never be a problem in a system that doesn't have to report the details of its operations. But I don't know a lawmaker who would read this report and say, yes, this is an effective means of ensuring personal responsibility and the best way to treat our most impoverished Kentuckians. Let's talk about the cost of criminalizing court debt. When we jail people for failing to pay fines and fees, we're not just wasting tax dollars, we're sanctioning what amounts to a modern-day debtor's prison, something the 14th Amendment was supposed to abolish nearly 2 centuries ago. Our current system cancels a Kentucky offender's debt at $50 a day, rewarding non-payment with incarceration while charging the law-abiding taxpayer $47 a day to house each offender. Meanwhile, second-order damage to families, employers, and communities who depend on the incarcerated Kentuckian is ignored. Public pain becomes private profit, and counties become financially dependent on a broken system. That's why some jails and local governments are resistant to change. They've come to rely on the fees and reimbursements tied to reincarnation. But if the only way to keep a budget afloat is to jail the poor and churn court debt, then the budget is the problem, not the people. No one is suggesting that breaking the law should have no consequences. Every offender must be held accountable, but punishments should fit the crime and the person's capacity to pay associated fines and fees must be considered. A justice system that traps people in poverty, destroys families, and burns through taxpayer dollars while failing to improve public safety is not conservative, it's counterproductive. None of us wants to coddle lawbreakers, but lawmakers must recognize that Kentucky's fines and fee system is broken. We need a smarter, leaner system, one that reports everything accurately and consistently. A conservative solution protects Kentucky taxpayers, upholds individual responsibility, and ensures the punishment fits the crime. And that's Joey Comley, Kentucky Director of Right on Crime. He will join us next with more as we talk about criminal justice reform from a conservative perspective in Kentucky. We'd love to hear what you think about this. 502-571-0970. Text us your comments today and questions, and we'll get them on the air. Stay with us now as we continue on Kentucky's Voice. Joey Comley, Kentucky Director of Right on Crime. Next. Don't go away.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Thanks for joining us today here on Kentucky's Voice. Jim Waters with you, as I am most Wednesdays here, and most importantly, we're glad to have you with us. And also, our next guest here today, Joey Comley, Kentucky Director of Right on Crime, joins us. And Right on Crime is a national campaign of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, which seeks to advance conservative criminal justice reforms that reduce crime, restore victims, lower taxpayer costs, and prioritize public safety and accountability. Joey, thanks today for taking some time out of your busy day and schedule. I know you've got a busy afternoon as well with, I think, Congressman Guthrie. You're going to be with him today. So we're glad to have you, though, take a few minutes here to talk about what's going on in the criminal justice policy here and reform. We read some of your op-ed there in the last segment, and this editorial in the Louisville Courier-Journal, which came out, I believe, last Friday, takes on the system of fines and fees in Kentucky. I don't remember seeing anybody talk about this, Joey. This is an interesting topic, and some things I learned, some things I didn't know here, and I have some questions. But someone says, I don't really care about doing anything to help out criminals. If they go to jail because they don't pay, then so be it. Let them go to jail. But you're saying that even if we look at our current policies, even from strictly a taxpayer's point of view, it's not working. It's a bad policy. So why should taxpayers care about the fines and fees system in Kentucky?
Jim, first, thanks for having me. And today's a busy day, but that's nothing new. And that's a good thing, right? Being busy is always a good thing. That's at least what my father said.
Well, mine told me it keeps me out of trouble. So.
That's true, too. I would say that any taxpayer, whether you're conservative or liberal or anything in between, should always be concerned about where their money is going and what it's being spent for. So the hopes in our fines and fees effort from last General Assembly was to simply open the door to allow for transparency, and then potentially knowledge and what flows next, accountability, right?
Right.
We'll never know if those funds are truly being utilized in an effective manner until we know how they're being spent and who they're being spent by. When we talk about fines and fees, it's not a hot topic. It's not something that typically drives a bunch of attention from the General Assembly, but from the taxpayer who realizes that they are funding everyone's stay in a Kentucky jail or prison. They should want to know, number one, why they're funding it, where those funds are actually going, how they're being spent, and where they could otherwise be spent. You're talking about a system with respect to incarceration that routinely drains a county's general funds.
Yeah, which the purpose of the fee, and I guess let's talk about that too, how inefficient this is. The purpose of the fines and fees is what? And also, does this affect people even maybe that haven't even been convicted of crimes yet? Is this, I mean, persons incarcerated, are these fees, does this apply to them as well?
Absolutely. So you're talking about people that are jailed on offenses that are pending potentially felony indictment or disposition. So pre-disposition, fines and fees rack up just the same. When someone's awaiting trial, they're still incarcerated. And those that aren't incarcerated might be on some type of, pretrial release, whether it's, home incarceration or another monitoring system. They're still accumulating daily fines and fees.
Yeah. So if they owe something here, and this is really mixed up, if they owe something, they actually get relieved of debt. Many inmates do get relieved of the debt they owe according to how many days they're incarcerated, whereas the taxpayer is paying nearly the same amount for that and is not benefiting from that. Talk about how that works and why why that matters.
Let's talk about the great irony there, right, Jim? Because we assume that a fine and a fee is meant to restore something, to restore either the harm done to society, the community, the victim in that case, or just to simply pay for the cost of operating the system. Yet at the same time, if we're incarcerating someone and by virtue of their incarceration, we're relieving them of that debt, well, then the average Kentucky citizen is actually paying twice. They're paying for the cost of incarceration, and they're paying the cost of relieving that person of their debt at the same time.
Right. So, the people who want to get tough on crime, this isn't working to do that either. This isn't good policy. You talk about too how this tends to affect lower income citizens. Maybe those who don't have can't wiggle out of some things legally or don't have those resources. And so I think, and this is it not a reason to be even more concerned about this? Because, our justice systems should be applied fairly across the board. And we know it's not perfect, but that should be the goal anyhow. And that should be the aim. And when we find policies that disproportionately affect the poor or underserved, then that's a cause for concern as well, isn't it?
I believe so. And Jim, the people of the Commonwealth are kind people. And I've told you this before, both as a friend and in exchanges in this forum. Kentucky is filled with the kindest people that I ever met in any state and in any country that I was ever stationed in. And that's why my family and I came back and settled here. That said, they're intelligent people and they don't like being taken advantage of. And that's exactly what this system does.
Yeah. Well, you also talk about how this benefits, this type of system benefits for-profit prison corporations. I guess for-profit's not a bad thing. We believe in that, when it's true free market capitalism. But in this case, you're talking about how these corporations take advantage of low-income Kentuckians, those who are behind bars. Talk about that for a second, and kind of some of the real disparities there in costs of items that they're benefiting from for inmates that buy those.
Yeah, I think in my article, I pulled two examples. One was a hairbrush, and I think the other was a brassiere for females. So, the cost disparity there, I think the comparison was $1 and some change for the hairbrush at any of your Dollar Trees or your DGs locally. And I think in prison, it was almost $10. It was $8 and some change. Yeah, right. $8.25.
Yeah.
And then the brassiere that could be purchased on Amazon was $8. But in the prison system, it was $43. So when you think about some of our most impoverished Kentuckians having to pay 5 to 8 times as much for a common item that they have to have on a daily basis because they're incarcerated, that just doesn't make any sense to anybody.
Yeah.
And
you're
go
right.
ahead.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's I did not realize that was going on, that disparity was there. So we're talking with Joey Comley, Kentucky Director of Right on Crime, who's with us today. And Joey, we've got just about 30 seconds left in this segment, but I'd like to, if you can stay over for one more segment, I'd like to talk to you about maybe some solutions here and some ideas you have about what can be done to address this, and also what you see as priorities coming up in the 2026 legislative session, helping our folks understand what's good conservative criminal justice policy. I think we can do it here. I think we can implement good policy that works and is and does protect the public at the same time, reduces crime. That should be our goal across the board. So if you can hang with us a few more minutes, we'll talk a little more right here on Kentucky's Voice. Thanks for joining us today. Stay with us for another segment here with our good friend Joey Comley from Kentucky, the Kentucky Director of Right on Crime here. Don't go away.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Thanks for staying with us today here on Kentucky's Voice. Thanks for joining us here. You can join the conversation at 502-571-0970. And we're delighted to have with us Joey Comley, who is the Kentucky Director of Right on Crime. It's a great national organization that focuses on conservative policies, and they have several state groups, and we're so delighted to have them here in Kentucky. And Joey's doing a great job, and we appreciate you coming on today, Joey, and talking a few minutes about some of these policies. And I want to make this more of a regular occurrence here because there's a lot going on. I think that conservative and our audience this is an audience of people who want to know what is the conservative angle, what is going on with to make us safer and to reduce crime. I think most conservatives want both those things to happen, and you certainly have made that a priority in your work here, and we appreciate what you're doing. Let's talk a little bit about, you talked before the break and made a good point about just so much of this about fine, and we're talking about the fines and fees in that are charged to inmates and how that works and in our prison system. But so much of this, isn't it, as you said, is just knowing what's happening, more transparency in terms of the funds, how they're being used, how much there is, what they're being spent on, and how they're being spent. And you talked a little bit about that with what it costs a prisoner to buy a hairbrush versus folks on the outside that aren't facing that. It really should be the opposite of anything, shouldn't it? I mean, people who are in jail, they don't have income, they don't have a job, many cases, and yet they're bearing the brunt of this. So it just seems really mixed up. But where do we start? I think transparency is what you're saying. We start there to solve some of these policies and make them better.
That's correct, Jim. What we're looking for here in this effort, this legislation, is simply to open the door to the taxpayers, right? To let them see how their money is being spent, where their contributions are going, and to potentially let lawmakers who represent them come up with a better way of doing things. For example, you talked about a hairbrush because it was mentioned in the piece that I wrote for the Courier Journal. Jim, you and I don't need the same hairbrush if we're incarcerated. It doesn't need a name brand. It probably doesn't need a comfortable handle,
right?
But I'd like it to go through my hair.
Yeah, right.
So it can be a much cheaper version of what we might use on a day-to-day when we're in, the confines of our own home.
Yeah. And as we said earlier, we're not opposed to profit, but when it's taxpayer dollars being spent, we need to know what kind of hairbrush it is, because if that's the issue here, we need to do more transparency about what kind of hairbrush it is. Might save taxpayers a lot of dollars if somebody was embarrassed by what kind of a hairbrush was being sold to inmates. That certainly can be an effective tool. Maybe we need some of that here. There was some transparency legislation passed earlier, I guess, this year in the last session, which was earlier here in 2025, that does require the Corrections Department to give some more information about folks who have been incarcerated, some information there. Is that going to be a bill that really gives us information that can help us create better policy, Joey? Is that going to make a difference?
Jim, I think any policy solution that is delivered by any responsible authority in the absence of information is bad policy. So I would assume that any information that we get out of the executive branch as it operates and spends the money that we give them, that's all good information, right? It informs future decisions. It informs existing policy, right? Because we have laws that are passed all over the Commonwealth or in existence for a number of years. Like, for example, Senate Bill 90 has to be renewed, or at least in terms of its funding, has to be reviewed and approved this budget cycle. So that's another example of just existing policy where we have to look at the money that was initially made available for that programming, see how much of it was spent, examine how it was spent, and then determine if we need to allocate more money for it or if there's still money available and we can potentially do more with it.
Yeah. So let's talk about your priorities in terms of this coming year, this coming session. We're into the interim now where all the committees are beginning to meet and decide what their policy priorities are going to be for the session. What can you tell us about that? And when Right on Crime, the national group, when they look at Kentucky, how do they see us compared to the rest of the nation when it comes to these common sense criminal justice reform policies? And how does that play into what the priorities are going to be? How's that help determine that?
So you asked about three questions there. I'm going to unpack it a little bit. I think the priorities for this next legislative session for Right on Crime here in Kentucky include fines and fees transparency. It's absolutely essential that taxpayers know how their money is being spent by the government. Number two is some clean slate legislation that simply eases the enactment of laws that have been on our books for about 30 years now. This is a technological solution to implement the law that otherwise keeps some of our folks who are looking for employment opportunities from, being able to check the block. No, I've not been convicted of a criminal offense in the last so many years. It simply enables automation to work through eligible offenses. These are all nonviolent offenses, and these are all people who have not committed any further infractions or violations of the law in the last 5 years. It enables them to seek meaningful employment and to truly be, contributors and beneficial members of our communities. The third thing I'd really like to see pass this session is we called it last year, the Family Preservation and Accountability Act. Really, it's caregiver consideration. So it's simply the legislature telling all judges, and granted, some judges are already doing this because they're doing great work on the bench all across the Commonwealth, but not every judge is doing this. And what we're asking them to do is to say, hey, when you get to the point of sentencing a nonviolent offender, you're to examine whether or not they're a caregiver of a dependent child. And you're supposed to consider that when you deliver a sentence. Because if I get sentenced to incarceration, Jim, I leave a home where I'm not only the spiritual leader, but I'm a father of 3 children.
Yeah.
So what happens to my children? Yeah. They suffer and they lose. Now, God forbid, my wife isn't here to pick up the slack, which she easily could because she's an amazing woman. Yeah. But if she wasn't here, the state would pick up that slack.
Yeah.
And now 2 of my 3 kids are in a state system while I'm also in the state system. And think about the utter waste there.
Yeah.
Think about the consequences to the child, to the family, to the community. I mean, it is unbelievable that we don't already have something on the books that calls for every judge who's examining a sentence to make that determination and then account for that. Consider it or determine that, look, based on the facts and circumstances of this case and the role that this individual plays in their home, I don't think it's relevant, or I do.
Yeah, I really like this because I think, and that's where we should allow judges to have some flexibility and to really be able to look at the situation, because there's really probably not 2 situations that are exactly the same and involve exactly the same issues. So I really like that, where we're going with that.
It's one more tool, Jim.
Sure.
Right? I mean, if we want to talk about this in tool sets,
right.
The first bill gives one more tool to the taxpayer, lets him and her know how their money's being spent. The second bill gives one more tool to employers so that they can actually run their small businesses and they can hire Kentucky's talent.
Yeah.
Number 3, it gives one more tool to the judges.
Right. And I think that's appropriate. And so those are 3 really good issues. Let's follow them. We're going to follow them during the session. We'll get some updates. If you don't mind taking a couple of comments off of our text line here, we've got a couple of minutes left. Joey Comley, who is the Kentucky director of Right on Crime here, and thanks for joining us today, Joey, and the great work you do. This texter said, what the prison system is charging is similar to what hospitals charge for bedpans and toothbrushes. Well, but we know the difference is we know what, being in a hospital is a lot different than being behind bars, is it not? I mean, there's different situations there.
It is. And guess what? Who's paying the bill most of the time?
Right. It's the
insurance companies or the taxpayer.
Right. That's right. Another comment, the mayor of Metro Louisville is excited about a complete makeover for the Belvedere as he neglects rebuilding the juvenile detention center. The priorities for dealing with youth crime are upside down. We have too many committees and too much costly pandering instead of accountability. This juvenile detention policies and the juvenile criminal policies in our state, Joey, we don't have enough time really to talk about this, but just a quick comment about are you concerned about this, and is this something that needs more help from Frankfurt?
Jim, I'm tremendously concerned about our juvenile detention centers, whether we are talking about the allocation of funding, whether we're talking about the continued professionalization of the correctional officers that work with youth. And my hat's off to them. That's tremendously difficult work. But guess what? It is some of the most important work that we can ever do, because that is the future of Kentucky that's being housed in those facilities. And do we want them to have a positive future and positive impact or not?
Very good, Joey Comley, Kentucky Director, Right on Crime. Thanks for joining us today. We'll have you back. God bless.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KY Voice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
The Hump Day version of Kentucky's Voice. We're in the final segment. This plane is getting ready to land. It just seemed like it got in the air not long ago. But our thanks to Joey Comley, again, the Kentucky Director of Right on Crime. Great conversation today. And I'm excited to see some of the criminal justice policies and reforms that we see happen here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, addressing some of our greatest challenges, such as the Juvenile Detention Center and such as the cost of incarceration and some of the high incarceration rates, and giving judges more flexibility. These are all common sense conservative policies. And, of course, at the end of the day, what we need are people's hearts to change, because no matter how good a law or how much leeway we give a judge, they can't change a person's heart. So that's where it's got to begin. But we're fortunate here to have folks like Joey working on this issue, like Right on Crime, and we'll be talking more about that on this show as well. And this is Kentucky's Voice. Right now, we're looking to hear what you have to say about this at 502-571-0970. Should we know more about how these fees and fines that are being collected for inmates and what taxpayers are paying? Should we know more about this, how those dollars are being spent? Love to hear what you think about that, or about the Juvenile Detention Center system, the Juvenile Detention System, 502-571-0970. There's been a lot of challenges with that, a lot of problems, a lot of abuse, a lot of talk from Frankfurt, but what needs to be done? What are the effective policies that we need to have? Well, one thing is that when you run out of phone numbers, you've got to get a new area code, and that's what's going to happen. Kentucky is officially getting a new area code on top of 502. Wanted to catch you up on a couple of Kentucky-related news items today. Beginning in 2027, Kentuckians in the 502 area code will begin seeing a new code assigned, and that is 761. So 502 will still be around now, but it's not going to just be 502 in this area. Once the longtime Louisville area code exhausts itself, new phone numbers will be assigned, a 761 area code. That is new phone numbers. So Kentuckians can expect that to begin in 2027, likely a few months before we're completely out of 502 numbers. While this is a challenge for companies and projects that have branded themselves around the iconic area code that covers Louisville and several surrounding counties. Think 502, like Evolve 502, like 502s. The new area code won't have a big effect on current owners at all of this illustrious area code, like WFPK wrote, public radio. Good story on this. They said the 502 area code will remain in use, and the only difference is the people within the 502/761 area will have to dial the code alongside the other 7 digits when making a call within that area. So that's going to kind of be a little bit of a pain, annoying. According to the Kentucky Public Service Commission, the group submitted 5 possible relief plans in October. However, they suggested the now adopted overlay area code plan, which they say is the most cost-effective and efficient. The commission also held several public comment meetings to give locals input on which plans they would prefer. The PSC already recently added a new area code in Kentucky in 2014. They overlaid the 364 area code on top of the 270 area code in Western Kentucky. There are other ways to solve the phone number shortage. A geographic split would break up the 502 area. One part would keep the 502 code. The other piece would get a new one. The PSC said that was the usual method in Kentucky until 2014. Senator Jimmy Higdon, our good friend from Marion County there, issued a statement about this, saying the 502 code is one of the original area codes created in 1947. At that time, it covered the entire state. Over time, the population grew. We had new technologies. The increase in personal lines and business lines have pushed the demand much higher than it was at that time, obviously, and higher than maybe even was anticipated. And so the timeline for this is that network preparations will begin in June of next year. Then in December, a permissive 10-digit dialing starts. That means you can use it or not. And then a mandatory 10-digit dialing begins on June 7th of 2027. The new area code numbers will start to be assigned on July 5th. So the entire transition period is going to last just over a year, and this will ensure that the new area code is active at least 6 months before the projected number shortage. You don't want to run out of numbers and then try to do all this and transition to a different area code. So what do you think about having to dial all 10 digits in the number? How long has it been since we had to do that? We had to do that back when we had rotary phones, and I know Dan remembers that. I don't really, but but what a pain that's going to be to folks who have to do that. And I'm just glad I have a 270 area code. So there, I'm not going to have to do it. I'm not going to have to dial 10 digits in order to make a call to Louisville. But if you're going to call me, you have to dial 10 digits. So there. So just remember that. But you'll have plenty of time to get used to it. No problem. Now to another serious topic, maybe more affecting some folks here in Jefferson County, as well as Fayette County. Both of the state's largest school boards are voting or want to vote to raise your taxes again. The Jefferson County Board of Education voted to approve a new property tax for next year during its meeting last night. Louisville's largest school district approved a real estate tax rate of 71.7 cents per $100 of assessed value. That's a slight decrease from last year's 73.5 cents. The personal property tax rate will remain at 73.5 cents per $100. So they want to raise the property tax rate for real estate. You know, they see these real estate values going up, and so they want to raise the rates. Jefferson County, though, would still bring in more tax revenue after the potential hike because of higher property valuations from reassessments in several parts of the county. So what I don't get about these school districts is this. When property values are increased and they're designated to be higher than they were before, they're pushed upward by the PVA, who sets those rates and determines what those properties are worth, then the amount of revenue that the school district goes up anyhow without a tax rate increase, without increasing the rate. And yet the folks who run the Jefferson County School Board and are on the board, they don't care about taxpayers. They certainly, if they don't care about students, which they apparently don't care at the poor performance of this district and the amount of dollars that are being spent, $2 billion budget. They have a $2 billion budget, but they claim to be $100 million in the hole on their budget. They claim to have a $100 million budget shortfall. And they have established a task force to help get their finances back on track. How do you have a $2 billion budget in Kentucky, in a school district in Kentucky, and you have a $100 million budget shortfall? We don't know enough about that. Yet they want to raise the property tax rate on real estate without telling you why we have this shortfall, where the money's being spent. You know, why is it we're underwater with that size of a budget and with the hundreds of millions of dollars coming in, and with no demonstrable improvement to speak of, or that is really making any impact in terms of the academic outcome for students? We don't know we don't know anything about this. We need more transparency from the Jefferson County Public Schools, and the voters need to demand that. They need to demand it at the voting booth the next time. This current board has been one of the least transparent boards that we've had, one of the least transparent school boards in Jefferson County or anywhere else for that matter that we've had. And they're probably only a close second followed. They're probably the only other district that's been nearly this opaque has been the Fayette County Public Schools, the second largest school district in Kentucky, which this week voted to hold a hearing to raise the occupational tax rate in Fayette County You remember back in May, we talked about this, and they tried to do this without a public hearing, without going through the process of hearing what the public might have to say about a tax increase. And the Attorney General sent a letter saying, this is illegal, you can't do it. And so they instead of saying, well, maybe this isn't the most popular thing we could do, or better yet, maybe this isn't the best policy that we could enact in order to address our shortfall, which they say is $16 million. And this is like with a $700-800 million budget in a school system half the size of Jefferson County, but they're going to push forward with it. And they established a task force in Fayette County, and this task force came together. They had folks from different backgrounds, different professions, different careers, different sectors of the society come together in a task force, and they agreed that the least popular option of addressing the school district shortfall was raising taxes. And yet, what does the school board do? They vote to have a hearing to raise the tax on occupational taxes in Fayette, in Lexington, Kentucky. And one of the things that task force said in Fayette County was use the contingency fund that you have to cover the shortfall rather than raise taxes on the taxpayers who've already been taxed enough, who've seen their property taxes go up, who've seen their school taxes increase. Not much difference in academic outcomes, though. I thought that's what the education system was all about, by the way. And yet they picked the one that even their own task force that they put together says is the worst option. And then this contingency fund that was supposed to have like $45 million in it supposedly has only about half that. So people were thinking there was a lot more funding available to cover this shortfall in the contingency, and apparently that's not even available. So the point being, whether you're talking about criminal justice reform earlier or like we are now, public education, we need to know more. Taxpayers deserve to know how their dollars are being spent, how those decisions are being reached, and what the outcomes are, what the return on their investment is. And all you have to do is look at 1 out of 3 kids in Jefferson County public schools reading proficiently to know that the return on investment is not a $2 billion return on investment per year, per budget, a budget that's twice the size of the Louisville Metro Council budget. And they take care of things. They actually do things productive. They repair roads. They provide public safety. They do some things you can see tangibly. When are we going to see improvement in our public school system for all the dollars that we're investing? Good question. Love to hear from you about that. Anyhow, we're out of time today. Thanks for joining us here on Kentucky's Voice. Join us this afternoon on television at 4 o'clock. We'll see you later. Have a great day. God bless.